After listening to that, I'll also mention that on Wednesday in the US, they announced a 25% tariff on imported goods from India, doubling the total tax rate to 50%. The reason is that India continues to buy Russian oil. So when it comes to these two things, where does India's real interest lie? Let's take a look at the import and export figures between India and the US. The total trade volume has risen to 200 billion. Goods trade is 128 billion, and services are 48.3 billion. All right, let's talk about goods trade. Here's the breakdown. India imports 87.3 billion. Exports to India are only 41.5 billion, so that's a trade deficit. This is 45.8 billion US dollars from the US to India. India runs a trade deficit with the whole world, but 70 to 80% of that deficit is with just one country, the United States. Just one country bears that. The service sector is actually quite balanced. The US has a small surplus. Hey, you have to understand that this balance in the service sector includes two major channels. One big channel is Indian professionals going to the US for infrastructure projects, and then there are also a lot of Indians going to the US to study. The number of Indian students has already surpassed that of Chinese students. This is very beneficial for India's economic development. So the fact that the US and India are on good terms is a good thing, the first point. But when it comes to US-India trade, India's exports to the US are pretty much a straight line, always hovering around 50 billion. No matter where you look, it's about the same every year. So what about the 80 billion? Is that for buying things? Let's take a look at what India is buying. Pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals come to me. If you want to get them through customs, then it's telecom equipment and so on. There's a lot. Actually, what else are they looking for? iPhones, gemstones. This is even being guided by the major powers. This is gold. In Hunan, they're making synthetic tiger's eye stones. Cultivating synthetic stones requires someone to inspect each one by hand, and they specialize in cutting cheap gemstones. And then there are refined petroleum products for export. They've refined some small products. India has huge oil refineries, gold and jewelry, and combed cotton. But Indian cotton is famous. As for their processed steel, laid-off workers, electrical equipment, and aquatic products, those divisions, who would dare to set up a division for that? Would anyone even dare to set up such a division? All right. From the table above, we can see that India's exports to the US are about 80 billion. Now, if we simulate price elasticity calculations, if the US continues to impose a 50% tariff on India, this 80 billion could disappear. Who's going to pay for that? The price elasticity is 0.6. When elasticity is low, if the price goes up by 20%, the quantity drops by 12%. This is called zero, and with low elasticity, the loss is 90 billion US dollars. If the elasticity is equal to 1, then with a 20% price increase, the quantity drops by 20%, and the loss amounts to 15.8 billion. What if the elasticity is high? This is what we call high elasticity for merchants. I want to explain that it's uncertain because all these products can be replaced. Why would anyone bother with this? When the price goes up and the quantity drops, the market loses 23.8 billion US dollars. In a scenario like this, everyone ends up losing 23.8 billion US dollars. However, trade has caused a huge impact, and as a result, the US has gained a trade surplus. India's trade keeps turning over, and the large trade deficit has affected its exchange rate and has also had a huge impact on its import needs. Export losses mean a loss of foreign exchange. If export value drops by 20 to 30%, equivalent to 1.4 to 3% of foreign exchange reserves, it could drop by 11.5% of foreign exchange reserves. Their foreign exchange reserves are okay, on the low side, but manageable. If you look at this chart, you'll see that the US is still a major presence. The second is the UAE, which also pays a significant price. After the UAE, it's the Netherlands, then Singapore, and then China. What about India? It can't be replaced. America is still an irreplaceable presence. That gap, that deficit, the trade deficit is about 40 billion, ranging from 12.7 billion up to 40 billion. In 2021, it continued to grow steadily. According to Wikipedia, India's exports are 420 billion, 420 billion in exports, and with so many imports, there's a big trade deficit, this deficit. Altogether, the gap is even bigger, this small number here, in 2010. And then what happened? 80 billion, 120 billion, 90 billion. India's trade surplus with the US almost makes up for a large part of its global trade deficit. Without the US, it would be over for India. If the US were gone, that's it. So business with the US is extremely important for India. That's the first point of this argument. Second point, so why does India buy Russian oil? As the world's third largest oil consumer, with a population of over 1.4 billion, India doesn't produce its own oil and is highly dependent on oil imports. 85%. By 2030, its consumption will surpass China, making it the world's largest oil consumer. Russia has also become the largest oil supplier. In the first half of 2005, its share was only 36%, with daily crude oil exports of 2 million barrels, second only to China. China is number one, so who comes next? It should be China dealing with India. This is exactly Donald Trump's strategy. These three countries first target India, make India surrender first, then go after Turkey, and finally surround China. Surround China. Here, this is China's import volume, and this is India's import volume. You can see how much it's increased. Originally, India didn't even buy Russian oil. India's ports weren't even set up to handle Russian oil. It's so far to transport it. Of course, India is isolated. In the Middle East, they buy oil from two places there. So why would they want to buy Russian oil? Because of the war, Russian oil is much cheaper for them. But oil from the Caucasus is even cheaper. If they transport it from the Caucasus, there are over 100,000, 16,700,000 barrels of oil. Bringing it back from the Caucasus means the shipping cost increases by 100,000. India is the world's third largest oil importer, bringing in 1.75 million barrels of crude oil every day. If they stop buying Russian oil, It will be hard to find alternatives to keep the market balanced. That's just intimidation. If they rush to the Middle East to grab oil, then the price will soar past 137. This is assuming that no one buys Russian oil anymore. If that really happens, if no one buys it, then the world's oil supply just won't be enough. After all, Russia produces 10 million barrels of oil, uses 3 to 4 million barrels itself, and the remaining 6 to 7 million barrels are exported as crude or refined products. If the oil is refined but the chemical products can't be exported, who's going to fill that gap? No one can make up for that. Donald Trump says the U.S. can make up for it. There's no way the U.S. can make up for it. All right, India's imports, Russia and Central Asia account for 43%, which is more than the Middle East. Isn't that strange? Okay, so everything on the right side for India is also from there. If it's not from the Middle East, then the imports from elsewhere have increased. Look at Russia. According to the data for 2024, India imports 4.8 million barrels of oil per day, and out of that, 1.9 million barrels come from Russia. That's 1.9 million barrels. If the price difference is $10, it's hard to calculate because shipping costs have gone up. With 700,000 barrels, how much is Russia actually getting paid? How do you estimate the original, bigger price gap? Some people pay $2, some a few more. Let's say it's about $5 per barrel. If you don't get it, there are ways. Who's coming to take a cut? 71 didn't follow, so I have to give it to him. If my teacher buys, whoever has it shouts, but 71 didn't follow either. But because of this, they were sanctioned by the US and lost 28 billion US dollars. So these two things can't really be compared. Let's suppose India's arms deals and related disputes, whoever buys, every year they get hit hard. And this is especially true for exports to the US, which can face tariffs as high as 50%, resulting in losses of nearly 26 to 40 billion US dollars. Why should I take a loss just so our country's structure can bear the US tariffs? That's just not reasonable. It's not reasonable at all. In that case, I'll just raise the price, and then I won't have to bear the cost. Because they're all buying from random sources, like the careless Indian supplier who only gives a small percentage of the goods, and most of it still comes from Russian stockpiles. Even when they send things out, India still relies heavily on us for supplies, and their military dependence has lasted for over a decade. They've also depended on us for certain guidance and support. When we made a move, you could see that Jinfeng is like Lopez, already a very vocal spokesperson. Luo Shi, you really think you can take us on? Of course, there are still many things that can be recycled or reused. Just keep buying. Economists warn that high tariffs will seriously damage India's manufacturing sector, especially in areas like jewelry, clothing, textiles, and chemicals, which are highly dependent on exports. The industry is facing a major shock. Let me give you an example to illustrate, talking about cotton exports and clothing. I'm saying that cotton is mainly used for clothing, and when it comes to other countries, the path they take is different. For example, Vietnam, Cambodia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all of them, but not Bangladesh. In 2004, Bangladesh exported 8.4 billion US dollars worth of clothing to the United States, with a tariff rate of 20%. Bangladesh is really making a big deal out of this. Labor costs in India are high, with monthly wages reaching 1.8 million US dollars, while in Bangladesh it's only 1.39 million US dollars. Even in the highest value-added sectors, like the most advanced textile processing, it's not like they're left out. In the diamond industry, these people can even relocate their operations. All these tightly connected business opportunities are also focused on the US market. So if you're not satisfied with selling to them, do you think you can easily sell to other markets? How should we handle tracking these countries? Is it because a certain country won't buy, so you just give up on that market? Our industry and business are also thriving. India's textile manufacturing industry employs 45 million people. Among its exports to the US are clothing, children's products, jewelry, and jewelry again. Some of the jewelry from Hunan, which has been hidden, has been wiped out. Many of these are also sold to Americans, totaling 22 billion US dollars. If tariffs are imposed, leading to a decrease in export volume, that would mean a loss of 6.6 billion US dollars, a 30% reduction, leaving only 1.32 million jobs. Labor-intensive industries are concentrated in low and mid-level positions and among female workers. This is a blow to regions with already fragile economies, mainly affecting Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, and Punjab. Those places are already struggling as it is. First, I'll set up a precedent by going to a country like Russia, which has a traditional diplomatic and friendship relationship with us, especially in the arms trade. Of course, getting Russian arms is essential, but there are always issues when it comes to maintenance and upkeep. Second, the money spent on importing oil from Russia doesn't really make up for this or that. That's why it triggered Donald Trump's tariffs. Third, if these goods are exported to another country, and if everyone buys them, and if everyone sells to the US, then there will be a trade deficit, which will affect India's exchange rate. That means these exports could also lead to unemployment. All right, as for extradition and security at my place, you know how it is with American lawyers. Everyone's supposed to be fair. Even the critics agree with me, don't they? How much do they really know? They're still doing business with Russia, you know. There's 7 or 8 billion US dollars involved, including 16.5 million tons of liquefied natural gas. The US has bought Russian goods too, Russian oil, the Lukoil Act, and also things like platinum, palladium, and chemical products. He said this was extremely unfortunate for the US side. In my view, the US and India are both just protecting their national interests. It's unfair, lacks legitimate grounds, and is unacceptable. India shouldn't be singled out and accused of being cunning. Currently, the US sells limited military equipment to India. If India insists on maintaining sovereignty, refuses to spend as told, and prioritizes historical alliances, continuing to buy large amounts of oil, it will bear losses of several billion US dollars. Not only could this lead to higher unemployment, but India, originally expected to grow by 8% this year, might only see 1.5% growth. The current government could lose the next election because of this.